Boy Modern Speed bring you another video, and today we're going to be giving you a video about the Raptors and the current situation with the roster. Now, I did take a while to come out with this video, but there's a lot to think about here, and there's a lot to go over, and we're going to go over it. So we're going to be talking about the head coach situation, what it feels going to happen with the players, both the starters and the reserves, and as well as what I think the future of the Toronto Raptors is going to be going forward. So first, I think I'm going to tackle head coach. So as many of you are aware, Dwayne Casey was fired shortly after the Raptors were swept by the Cavaliers. And quite frankly, this makes sense. It makes sense that the Raptors would fire him. And the fact of the matter is, you got swept twice in 2 years. And clearly something needs to change. And I think when you look at this roster and how it is, how it's built, and what it's been able to do, you don't necessarily want to touch too much of it. And the fact of the matter is, you got to start looking at other areas to get rid of, to fix things. And Casey just happened to be that scapegoat. He ended up being the person that ended up getting the axe there. It was pretty sad. The Raptors have improved over the years with Casey, but the fact is the Raptors need a fresh look, and they definitely need to do something about playing against LeBron, because the Raptors have had their issues there with playing against LeBron James. They got swept 4 times in a row, and they just haven't been able to solve LeBron. They've just constantly been getting stopped by him. So they clearly needed a new look. Now, clearly it was a sad situation, but ultimately I think it makes sense. The Raptors obviously need some sort of new mythology when it comes to facing LeBron in the finals, in the playoffs, sorry. And I think going with a new head coach may revitalize this team. Now the question is, who are the Raptors going to get? And I think ultimately I don't think we're going to see a huge name coming to Toronto. And part of the reason I say that is because when you look at this roster and where it's going, you really don't know what's going to happen with that. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that with the players, but we don't really know. I think this roster is in a situation where everything's fair game and you don't really know what's going to happen with it. And the fact that LeBron James is still in the East. So a lot of teams, a lot of coaches might look at this roster and be like, in a couple years, this may not be a playoff contender anymore. Let me go with another team in the East that's growing. It's going to take a couple more years for that team to grow, but by then, hopefully LeBron has started to slow down. So I don't think they're going to get they're not necessarily going to be getting a top name coach, but I do think they'll be able to get somebody internally. And obviously we've heard things about getting some of the 2 assistant coaches, possibly getting Jerry Stackhouse. And in my opinion, I think the Raptors should go with Jerry Stackhouse. He's done very well with the Raptors G League affiliate, the Raptors 905. So, and I think just give him a look. He's won a championship with the G League. Why not? And he'll give them a different look. He's not the same as Casey. He's a bit more of an old school coach. And I think maybe that might help out the Raptors. I think it might help out. So I think they're going to go with Jerry Stackhouse. But I do think whoever they end up choosing is going to be an internal pick. So that's my thoughts on the head coaching part for the Toronto Raptors. We got to move on to the players now and what's going to happen with this roster and where the Raptors are potentially going to go. As I mentioned before in the head coaching section, the Raptors are in a bit of a weird situation with this roster. We really don't know what's going to happen with it. And they're kind of in a tweener state. They're a good team. They're a great team. They have great assets, but they just haven't been able to get over that hump, to get to that next level and prove that they're a top tier team. And many folks, analysts, have been looking at this roster and just don't believe that this roster has enough faith. And the Raptors haven't necessarily helped themselves in the way they've been playing. So the way I want to kind of break this part down is we're going to be looking at the starting lineup and the reserves. And then we're going to talk about the future and what's going to happen with this roster and what I think is going to happen. So let's look at the starting lineup at the moment. So when we're looking at the starting lineup, we got Jonas Valanciunas, OG Anunoby, we got Serge Ibaka, DeMar DeRozan, and Kyle Lowry. Now, obviously, when you look at that roster, that's a pretty decent starting lineup considering a lot of the other starting lineups in the NBA. But honestly, when I look at this, I think the only player that's untradeable in that starting lineup is OG Anunoby. Given his play in the playoffs and how he was defending LeBron, he's going to be a great player. Um, it's going to be seen if he can be a very great offensive player, but quite frankly, right now as a defensive player, he's really good. But I feel like with the other four players that I've mentioned, anything's fair game. And I don't think they're necessarily safe from being traded at this point. Now, let me explain. I think we'll start with Serge Ibaka. With Ibaka, he just hasn't been playing the way the Raptors have wanted him to. Offensively, he's been really a downer. Defensively, he's been pretty good. But offensively, he's been a bit of a downer, and we need a bit more from him. Especially in the playoffs, he's sort of disappeared offensively, and his jump shot was just non-existent. In terms of JV, I feel like he's the type of player that has a lot of potential, but the Raptors just haven't been giving him the opportunities or the touches to reach that. And, it's a bit sad, but quite frankly, that's just the truth of it. And I feel that the Raptors might end up trading him and maybe playing this more traditional role where you're getting a big that is mobile and can play defense. JV's a great offensive player, but the Raptors are just not giving him enough to be that player. And that's just my opinion. A new head coach may change that, but it really depends on what the coach is. And given how the NBA is, they're moving away from players like Jonas. So it is possible the Raptors might trade Jonas just because of the how the NBA is going right now. And now I'm going to be talking about DeMar and Kyle Lowry in kind of the same way. With DeMar and Kyle Lowry, I feel that they could get traded, and it really depends on what the Raptors are thinking now. If the Raptors believe that they have players on their roster, and given how the bench mob is, and I'll be talking about them in a bit, if they feel that they have a player that could potentially replace one of these guys, I feel that one of these guys might be traded, DeMar or Kyle Lowry. I don't think both of them are going to go, but I do feel like one of them is going to go. Now, the player that most likely will go is probably Kyle Lowry because of the amount of point guard depth that the Raptors currently have. With Van Vliet, yes, he's a restricted free agent, but I do think they're going to sign him back. We'll talk about that in a bit. DeLon Wright, and they got Lorenzo Brown. So those are three other capable point guards there. I do think you trade Kyle Lowry and you try to get back a good piece. And if you can get back a wing that can help you on that defensive side, especially when you're talking about players like LeBron and Kevin Durant and guarding those players, that'd be great. And I feel like that's going to happen. But honestly, it's hard to say what's going to happen. I feel like the Raptors have to look at that because they don't have a lot of cap to make necessary moves right now. But I do think it is a possibility that one of those guys are going to go. I do think it's going to be Kyle Lowry. I think DeMar DeRozan has a lot more room to grow. And I feel that, the way he is and the way he is mentally when it comes to the game of basketball, he's going to look at these past 2 years and I think he's going to come back a bit stronger. And especially on that defensive end, because that's pretty much where his game needs to evolve next, is defensively. So I do think DeMar can make that push, but ultimately, I love Kyle Lowry, but it might be the end here. The Raptors might need to look to trade him and start growing their younger players. Now I'm going to talk about the bench mob in more of a grand scope of thing, and ultimately I feel that the bench mob, and I'm more specifically talking about DeLon Wright, Fred VanVleet, Jakob Poeltl, Pascal Siakam. These guys got to stay. CJ Miles, sorry, forgot him as well. These guys got to stay. That bench was the best bench in the league by far. And when those players came in, they held things steady. And if not, they actually improved the play as they were playing along. I think the Raptors need to make sure that they keep that core intact as much as possible and not touch that. I don't think any of those players on that bench should be moved, especially from the 5 players that I've mentioned. You might look at trading players like Lucas and Norman, moving those players or not moving those players. But I think from the bench mob, you got to bring those guys back. You got to keep those intact and ensure that those guys don't leave. The Raptors definitely need to bring back Fred VanVleet. He was a core part of that bench mob. And, he is in the talks for 6th Man of the Year. He's probably not going to win it. But the fact that he's in the talks shows just how much of an impact he's made on this roster in the short amount of time that he has. He looks like a veteran out there, and he knows what he's doing, and I feel like he's pretty much untouchable at this point. They have to bring him back. So ultimately, I think the shakeup here has to do with that starting lineup and what's going to happen with that. So the question comes down to, where do the Raptors go now? What is the future of the organization, and where do I think it's going to go? And the answer I have for you is, I don't know. I mean, clearly right now, the Raptors are probably in a wait-and-see approach. I think a lot of teams are not going to be making moves to trade with the Raptors right away, just given what this free agency period is going to look like. Paul George is available, LeBron's available. Yes, the Raptors have some assets, but they may not be going after the assets the Raptors may want to get rid of. So we may not actually see anything for quite some time, and I don't think we're going to be seeing the Raptors looking for draft picks either. They don't have a draft pick during this year's draft. So the fact of the matter is, it's hard to say where this Raptor team is going to go because we don't know what's going to be available. But I think the Raptors should make an effort in changing up that starting lineup. I do believe Lowry might go, and the Raptors should look to get a wing that could help them out defensively and help them with guarding LeBron James, keeping him contained. OG did a great job. Pascal did a great job as well. But I don't think that's enough. I think the Raptors need to potentially go out there and get a player that can help them out there. And I do believe one of their starting bigs is going to go to Jonas, or Ibaka is probably going to go. Which one, it really depends on who they're going to get as head coach. And again, we don't know what that's going to be because, as I said before, I think it's going to be internal, and I don't think we're going to get a lot of huge names because a lot of people are not confident with where this team is going and what's going on with it. So that's my thought. The Raptors are kind of in a let's see what kind of happens kind of approach, unfortunately. Those are kind of my thoughts on what's going to happen. I guess we'll see. It's going to be very interesting. What I believe is going to happen, again, Kyle Lowry's probably going to get traded. Jonas or Ibaka is going to get traded. And the Raptors keep the bench mob intact. That's what I think is going to happen. But at this point, it's hard to say just given how this roster is. And given that it is Toronto Raptors. They just haven't been getting the respect that they deserve to. Anyways, let me know what you think. What do you believe is going to happen with this roster, and where is it going to go? Do you think that the trades that I've said will happen? Do you think some of those players will get traded? Do you think the Raptors should trade players in that bench mob to improve the roster? Or do you believe that the Raptors should keep the roster the same and, just get a coach internally and just play the same way they have been, because they have been improving every year? Let me know what you think. Leave a comment down below. And you know how it is, folks. It's your boy Modern Speed signing off. Later, everyone.